Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Community Improvement Plan Evaluation Committee. I'd like to start it at 4:06, please. I'll call it to order. Approval of the agenda. Can I get someone to approve the agenda? Julia, and seconded by Chris. All in favor? Thank you. Adoption of, actually, you know what? I'm going to change this around a little bit. So I'm going to do a couple things before we get into that. Member resignation. Becky Allen has been with us since December 17th, 2018. That's going on 3 years almost. And she's resigned from the committee and is moving on to other projects, hopefully. We're going to wish her the best. She's been inspirational in our discussions. She's been a great mediator between Chris and keeping us on stream, getting new ideas onto the table. I, for one, am going to really miss her on the committee, but I wish her well and we'll hope for the best for her. Replacing Becky, we have a new member, and I'd like to welcome Julia Crowder to our committee. I hope I said that right, Julia. She is the new manager for economic development here in Smiths Falls. I understand she's got a lot of experience in CIP, which will be very welcome to our committee. And we'd like to welcome you as the new member to our committee. Mary, I don't think we have to vote that in or anything, do we?
No, you do not.
Okay, so you are now officially a member of our committee, and I'll just continue on with our agenda from there. But I wanted to welcome you on first before we continue.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Adoption of the minutes from July 14th. Did everybody read the minutes? Was there any discussion on those? Anything to change? So I'll ask for a motion from someone to accept the minutes from July 14th, please.
Oh, sure.
Okay, Chris, seconded by Julia. And all those in favor? Yes, thank you. Passed. Project update. So Mary, maybe you'd like to start on this and explain the background on what's going on right now.
Sure. So, I mean, I know Irv and Chris were there at the last meeting in July, but Dorothy and Julia, you were not. So 21 Main Street East, which is the former KFC, had submitted an application under programs 1 and 2. Program 1, it was for 2 signs and a wraparound awning. And program 2 was just for the interior retrofit for a new restaurant, Sagar's Indian Cuisine, which is actually currently a restaurant in Carlton Place, and they were looking to open up a second location at this in this area. So 2 motions were passed at the meeting on July 14th, a conditional approval for program 1 on several conditions, one being that the ground sign not be internally illuminated, that there be some vegetation on the property, removal of the existing readergraph sign on the ground sign. And then for program 2, there was a motion that the committee essentially supported the application for an amount between $10,000 and $40,000 at the discretion, and the amount to be at the discretion of council. So the applicant has since that motion withdrawn his request for program 1 funding. He felt, unfortunately, that the approval was too complex and that he couldn't meet the requirements. So we're only left with a program 2 funding request at this time. So there's some provisions in the procedural bylaw that allows for reconsideration whenever there's certain criteria that's met. So I reached out to the clerk, and the clerk has identified that the withdrawal of the program 1 request is considered new information for the application. So as per section 32D of the procedural bylaw, the committee may now dispose of the previous motion for program 2 in order to allow for reconsideration of that motion.
For
So
program 1, you mean, don't you?
not program 1, for program 2. So the program 2 motion was for an amount between $10,000 and $40,000, and for the identified amount to be at the discretion of council. So in order to allow for reconsideration, the quorum of the committee here this evening must have a 2/3 majority vote to dispose the initial motion. Only after the initial motion has been disposed of can we entertain discussion on a new motion. So you basically you would discuss, hey, we want to dispose this, and then you can discuss the new motion. You can't have both discussions at the same time.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Dorothy first, but I just want to ensure that everybody understands that we need to rescind the first motion before we can go on to any other discussion, okay? So Dorothy?
But they're two separate motions, right? So you're not rescinding both, are you? Just one or both? Or-
The applicant, so both the program 1 and program 2 funding requests are on the same application. And
Okay,
they were considered at the same time, but the committee passed 2 motions because they had hosted discussions separately last month. So they had their program 1 discussion followed by the program 2. So that's why there's 2 separate motions. But it's one package and one application. And now that the program 1 request has been withdrawn, it's considered new information and can be reconsidered.
Okay, thank you.
So when you say that, is the program 1 application or motion that we made automatically off the table because he withdrew his program 1 request?
That's correct.
So we don't have to do anything with that part. We have to deal with the program 2 part of the application and the motion that was put forward at that point.
That's
Okay, bring it back to the table. Do we want to rescind the program 2 component? Chris?
I'd certainly look forward that motion. I would forward that, or I would propose that motion for sure to rescind program 2.
Okay, and anyone else have a comment or position here?
And I'll second that as well.
Okay, all right, let's have a vote on that we're going to rescind the motion for program 2 application. Okay, if we can vote, all in favor? Dorothy, are you in favor or against?
Well, I'm still a little unclear. Does that mean that after you've rescinded it, program 2 is off the table, or does it mean there's going to be a new motion?
It would need to have a new motion.
So it could have a new motion after that one's been rescinded.
Exactly.
Okay. Sure, yes, yeah.
Okay, so we're in agreement to rescind that. Now I'll bring the discussion back to the table. Do we want to have another motion to support program 2? And if we do, to what extent do we want to support it? Keeping in mind that the last extent was from 10,000 to 40,000 at the discretion of council. Mary, before we talk about that, how much money have we got left in our budget?
So it's $40,003.15.
Okay,
So, and just if you'd like to give me for me to give a quick overview, this applicant specifically has demonstrated a total maximum value of over $100,000. So under program 2, he has applied for the second funding stream. So this is the higher amount at maximum $40,000. So he is eligible for that maximum amount. Basically, so how this program works is 50% of the 50% of the funding granted is considered a forgivable loan over the course of 5 years. And then the other remaining 50% is repayable to the town of Smith Falls at a 0% interest rate over 5 years.
okay, thank you. To keep in mind that if council agrees to our original proposal of up to 40,000, that would decimate our budget for the rest of the year. We would have zero budget and no possibility of accepting any other applications till 2022. And then we have to have council approve the funding towards us. Chris?
Everybody knows how I feel about program 2, but I'm going to go on and rant about it anyway. I have no appetite, no pun intended, to support any motion for any money to be given on the inside when the previous applicant doesn't want to follow any of our recommendations. He could leave the building looking exactly the way it is, and we're going to give 10, 20, $30,000 taxpayers' money to help support a for-profit business on the interior only? Absolutely not. I will not support it. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Julia, I'm going to put you on the spot, seeing as you're new to the committee and you're the head of economic development. What's your
Yes.
thoughts?
And so I swing the other way than Chris. You know, this building has been sitting for a very long time based on the images that we've seen. It needs significant repair inside there. And we have a new business owner who has come to invest in our community and is asking for some help to bring that building up to code, to make it safe, to make it beautiful, to offer us new restaurant services, as well as, you know, potential new employment opportunities in the area. He has said that he is going to do some beautification to the exterior. He's going to paint it. Within the application, he also said he'd work with us on color guidelines. So he is looking to put some time and effort and money into the facade, but he's not looking to get any money from us to do that. He's going to do that on his own, just because the signage itself, the big sign pole, is out of his scope with what he can do right now. Not to say he might not come back next year and look to do that when he has some more money to put towards that as well. He's a small business owner. This is his second location. So, you know, as a small business owner, not everyone has a lot of money. This is their livelihood. So I'm in support of supporting small business owners and doing what we can. And this is what this, you know, this program is for. It's to provide funding to small business owners to help them get ahead and to invest in our community. So I'm in support of the application.
Perfect, thanks. Dorothy, how do you feel about it?
First, I apologize for missing the meeting last month, but I have read the minutes. And I think that since the committee approved the program too, in principle at the last meeting, I would support us continuing to do that.
Okay, thank you. Julia?
I just wanted to touch base on the funding and what we have left in the pot. We're kind of getting to the end of the year. I know he would max out at 40,000 if we were to approve that and go to council. We're also looking at revisions to the CIP and some changes to it. And I think if we were to max it out at that point, the committee could look and staff can look at making those changes to the CIP and then starting fresh in the new year with a new pot of money and not having to kind of worry about any new applications for the remainder of the year.
Okay, it's my understanding that we might get some new applications regarding signage on Beckwith Street. I don't know if we've heard anything else about that, but that would mean that we'd have to push those programs to 2022.
Mary, do you have any insight based on consultations?
I haven't heard anyone since before our last meeting. Or
Okay. Chris?
So the CIP is not to beautify the downtown, it's to make one building look nice inside. Is that, I just completely misunderstand the program, I guess.
It's both. It's to support,
Is
you
that
know,
right?
yeah.
Okay,
to
and
support
the fact that the
beautification
sign
from the
is,
outside, but also to support small businesses and to ensure that the buildings in our community are maintained to a proper standard. So when, you know, if this business goes out of business, hopefully not, you know, the next person that would go to purchase this business, it's going to be upgraded already. So the likelihood of it getting purchased and repurposed in a you know, timely manner, it will help if the renovations have been done. So it is a benefit.
but the fact that the site's contaminated, does that not give the town some liability? Do we ask a lawyer about this or no?
There's no liability because we're not digging up the ground. We're not changing anything. Any contamination with regards to asbestos in the building itself, that has to be mitigated by the property owner. That has nothing to do with the town, and there's no liability to us. And if he doesn't complete the project, he doesn't get money. It's that simple.
But it's the site that's contaminated, not the building, so.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna get, there's no such thing as financing on it, so that's interesting, that we would support that when no other branch or bank would, so, okay.
It's a good point. Okay, do we have a motion to do anything here? Julia, you've kind of nudge towards, we should support the infrastructure inside the building. You're thinking up to 40, between 10 and 40,000 as in the first motion?
Yep, if, I would say, like I said before, if I think if we max it out, if we know, Mary, that there's no other applications potentially coming forward, or they're very tiny applications that could be pushed off to next year, I would say let's max it out now and let's focus on, you know, re-updating the CIP and getting that to where it is, and then starting fresh with another pot next year. And that will give people time to, if they do want to apply, then that's going to give them time to get their affairs in order and get their quotes. And then they know that next year, when it does open again, that they can submit right away in order to get their application in before the busy season and before construction starts.
Okay, Mary, there's a number of things that are going on in the background regarding the report and so on. So we've got meetings scheduled for September, October, November, possibly December. So 4 meetings for this year. Do we have enough going on in the background to keep us going for 4 meetings? Or if we give away all the money, then really we're closing down the CIP till next year?
So as you're aware of, I did prepare a draft monitoring report for Carl's review before my holidays. I've now gotten comments back from Carl, and I will be revising my draft report mid to late next week, and following that, reaching out to the subcommittee for discussion. So after that, the subcommittee did suggest that that report go through a level of committee review before that hits the council table. So that would be the work plan for the committee the remainder of the year.
Okay, so who's on the subcommittee again?
Right now, it is just Irv and Councillor McGuire. So that would just be the 2 of you, because Becky has resigned, so there is that position open.
Okay, we need a 3rd person on that subcommittee for sure if we're going to look at it, or we just pass it on to the CIP committee as a whole and just vet it that way.
We don't exactly have a whole bunch of business, Irv. I can't see why we need a subcommittee when we don't have much to discuss as a committee.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. Okay, so Julia has kind of put a motion forward. Similar to our last motion, Mary, including the 10 to 40,000, pass that on to council for a decision on the amount. Julia, am I correct in that assumption?
I think I'm putting it back to the committee to see if they are in favor of, you know, approving or, you know, suggesting the approval of the entire amount, and then closing it down in terms of applications for the remainder of the year and focusing on, you know, revising the CIP and starting. So I'm putting that out to the committee. If you guys are in favor of that, then that's the motion that I'm putting forward.
Okay, so you're not leaving it to council, you're leaving it up to us to make a decision.
Council ultimately has to approve it, but I think it's our job as the committee to vet it here and then give them our recommendation, not necessarily putting council in a position to decide how much money they want to give a business owner.
Okay, Chris?
Again, we're spending taxpayers' money, hard-earned money that I contribute a substantial amount to. I have no intentions of using the rest of CIP's budget on one project. That is just, it's irresponsible is what it is, quite simple, so.
Okay, could we agree on something less? Let's say 25,000, and that leaves us some money till the end of the year, that if we do get any applications coming forward, we can at least vet them and maybe move some money to those applications. I know that Becky had some signage components kind of in the works with a few businesses that might come forward. Chris, I'm tending to agree with you on this, not on the standpoint of not giving money to this person, because I believe that we should, but I don't like the idea of going the whole 40,000. I think something less would be more appropriate, and that gives us a little leeway for the future. Mary, we did approve something on Russell Street the last the last meeting also. Does that 40,000 leave money aside for that program?
That $40,000 is after that motion for Chuckles Jack.
Okay, okay, perfect. Okay, I'm, can we agree on 25,000?
I would support that.
Okay. Dorothy, would you
I'll-
support that?
I'd support $0, so.
Yeah, Chris,
I'll second the motion for, yeah.
okay, so we'll look at 25,000. Chris is gonna vote against the motion.
In a recorded vote, as my friend Councillor McGuire asks for all the time, so.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so all in favor of the motion and 25,000, if you could raise your hands, please. Okay, thank you. And against? Thanks, Chris. Okay, Mary, are you all right with that?
I have it.
Perfect. Okay, let's go on to the recommendations to streamline applications, the revised components. Okay, Mary, can I pass that on to you to just kind of give us an overview of what was discussed?
Sure, do
And
you want me to do this per section?
sure, mainly I mean, we have the background, mainly with the motions and if there's changes to the motions per section.
So I'm actually going to give just a little bit of background because Julia is new here. So in June, Julia, well, actually May, Irv just created a little bit of a working group consisting mainly of municipal staff that sat on the CIP committee or with the staff resources, just to identify some areas of improvement to streamline applications. So from that working group, there was a few areas identified and some recommendations came forward in June to the committee. So after the committee's discussion in June, the report's been revised and there's some recommended motions coming forward to reflect the discussion of the committee in June. So the first area that was noted for improvement was pre-consultation. The committee has done pre-consultation in the past. So there's a recommended motion that the CIP committee appoint a subcommittee responsible for conducting pre-consultation for CIP applications and inquiries under programs 1 and 2 of the community improvement plan, that the appointed subcommittee members shall conduct a site visit of the subject property prior to providing pre-consultation comments, and that the subcommittee identify the sections of the Program 1 evaluation matrix considered not applicable to the evaluation of Program 1 applications prior to circulation to the CIP committee.
Okay, any discussion on that? Julia?
So just based on my experience coming from 3 different municipalities and having, managed 2 different community improvement programs, most of the time pre-consultations and vetting of applications is happening by staff, because we're able to streamline that process and do it internally and bring it to the committee with all of the information and all of the facts, and allow you to review the application and determine amounts for approval and or not approval. So I think that is the best approach. It is a best practice when we're looking at CIP processes. So I would say I feel that staff should continue to do that and not have a subcommittee of a committee going out and doing consultations.
Mary?
Sorry, Julie, I don't usually do this, but I thought I would ask a question. So the CIP right now itself, so under section 8.3, it gives staff essentially screening criteria. None of that is design oriented. So I guess my question would be, is in your past experience, have staff conducted that design pre-consultation? So this committee has their downtown core design guidelines that gear their evaluation. And what we're experiencing is that we're getting applications that don't meet the downtown core design guidelines. So that's where that pre-consultations essentially comes in. But there's obviously differences of opinion when it comes to design. So my idea of good design that could comply with the downtown core design guideline could be different from Chris's idea or Irv's idea. So the idea was to get a few different perspectives in that pre-consultation circle so that an applicant would have an idea as to what would be considered good design and what would be an easier evaluation process through the committee.
So yeah, staff would do pre-consultation on all of that and make sure that the application is complete before it goes to the committee. And so it would include design guidelines, it would include costing and making sure that all the invoices were acquired, and making sure that they understand that, you know, there may be building permits and sign permit applications that need to be acquired. So we would do a full pre-consultation similar to what planning does when you're vetting a site plan application or a zoning application. And we developed the design guidelines to set out the design guidelines. So, and the new ones, the renderings that were provided, that gives 3 different concepts to the same building. And I think that if the application is consistent with one of those 3 types of designs that the renderings are showing or that the design guidelines are setting out, then that meets the criteria. So there doesn't need to be any discussions. It's not about personal opinion over design. It's, does it meet the guidelines? Is it within the guidelines? And staff are able to vet that. I don't think it needs to be a personal discussion at the committee level. If I like blue, but I like black, that's not, you know, I don't think that's where we need to go.
Okay, Chris?
Okay, so you, did you work, was it a combination of 3 municipalities that went together for the CIP, or was it you worked for 3 different municipalities?
Yeah. So the city of Aurelia, we developed and implemented a brand new CIP for them in the downtown core. And that was something that I managed as well. And then the town of Gravenhurst already had a CIP in place. And we did a review of that CIP and update while I was there, as well as we managed the committee. So CIP was actually under economic development in both municipalities. And so we were heavily involved. We did all the pre-consultations, we did all of the background work, and then we supported the committee when it came to them actually deciding how much an applicant would get or may not get. In some instances, applications were denied if they didn't meet their criteria, but you know, it usually wasn't on personal preference. It was because, and staff would deny it. Staff wouldn't even take it to the committee because it didn't meet the guidelines and they couldn't get all the information they needed required for the application to be complete. So it wouldn't even end up at the committee for discussion because we would do our due diligence as staff to vet it before it got here.
And what were the budgets for both those municipalities? For the CIP, sorry.
So we had 70,000 in Gravenhurst, and I think it was upwards of 100 and some thousand in Aurelia. That was, you know, 6-7 years ago. But we also didn't have caps in Aurelia as well. Applicants could, you know, stack grant applications, and there were no caps. But in Gravenhurst, it's very similar to Aurelia, where it's 50% of the program ask, basically.
It both were for the downtown core?
Yes. That's traditionally what
community
CIPs
wide
support
rather than-
are the downtown core.
Okay, I know you say that personal perspective shouldn't get into the decision, but it seems it does around the table, and there's no doubt about it. And that has caused us quite a bit of agitation at our meetings. Everybody's passionate about their position, and I can understand that. But the thought was that if we do some of this work outside of the committee, so instead of, yes, it falls within the guidelines, but then within the guidelines, there's still sections for movement within those guidelines, even though they sound like they're pretty specific. Let's say program 1, we worked quite hard on the program 1 matrix for the evaluation. We thought that looked great, but now when we find we're using it, there's still room for movement, and that movement causes discrepancies between us, and it does become personal.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we're looking at streamlining that internal process and looking at kind of better outlining those guidelines. So that gap isn't so big for, you know.
Well, and I think, and in some ways, I think council needs to step forward and close some of the doors that we found are open, and give us guidance on how to move forward and how far to move forward. So if you're talking about a historic building, but not designated, not on a list anywhere. It's historic. How far do we go with that building to ensure its historic value? Or if it's changed in the 1950s, do we keep it historic to the 1950s? What are we going to do there? Like we've come up with a lot of discussion that has taken us not just for making a decision in one meeting, but passing it on to a second meeting and a third meeting before we got it somewhere. So can we move some of that with a subcommittee of people who are on the CIP committee to discuss it ahead of time and kind of streamline the application through those discussions and not have everything coming to this group? That's our concern.
Yeah. And I
Chris?
don't know if you want my opinion on that, if that was a question or you're just.
Well, just a second. I'll get your opinion in a second. Chris, you had your hand up.
I think it was so much easier when we could meet in person. We could listen to the application, we could discuss it, and then we could vote on it. The voting on it before the meeting is without knowing all the facts and figures, it just made no sense whatsoever. So I think we were able to get a lot more agreement when we could all sit around the table. It's true, sometimes I don't agree with Councillor McGuire or some of the other members, and it does get a little warm, but it's always in the spirit of trying to make the best decision. So, and I found when we had in-person meetings, it was so much easier. You might not agree with everybody, but you could at least come to a consensus that in this forum right now, it just probably doesn't work as well for the CIP.
Okay, Julia?
So, and to follow up on with Chris and the consultation part as well, in Gravenhurst, we actually requested or allowed applicants to come forward and speak to the committee based on their application so that the committee members could have a chance to speak to the property owner of the business owner themselves to get some clarification in the meeting to help make a decision. So that could be something that we implement instead of having a sub part of the committee, because I don't necessarily think it's appropriate to have some portion of the committee get more information and then bring it back to the committee that's hearing it for the first time. That's where my concern comes in with the subcommittee. And that's why, again, I feel it's best to have it vetted through staff who are doing this all of the time and it's consistent, because staff don't usually change as much, but CIP committee as council change and appointments change. If we can keep it with staff, then it's also going to stay consistent for a longer duration.
So when you say staff, who are you considering?
So Mary, since she's already doing pre-consultations, and it was Becky, but Becky was doing it in the interim when Jennifer wasn't around. So Becky didn't necessarily step down or resign, but because I've come into the position, I've now stepped up to take the place.
So yourself and Mary would be doing the pre-consultation. Okay. Okay, do we want to let this component on the pre-consultation slide, the creation of a subcommittee, having that subcommittee meet with the applicant, and then the other part of that is the not applicable component, and we really need to decide something about that and how we're going to manage that one before we do our vote. Now, if we go to in-person meetings, which I really do hope we do, so everybody needs to fill out the survey that's on the that Mary has sent us on that, and we could decide on that previous to, and then have our discussion previous to doing a vote on what the evaluation is all about. Okay, seeing as we aren't going to have many applications coming forward between now and the end of the year anyways, let's put all that aside for now. I don't want to let it drop because a lot of discussion went into those components. And the not applicable part is very important. We need to decide before we do our evaluation as to what's non-applicable and what do we keep in there. Any other comments on these motions? Okay, Mary, can you go on to the next section, please?
Sure. So the next section is regarding pre-approvals. So as you're all aware, we did the downtown revitalization render project. Julia has now been caught up to speed with that. So we now have 20 renders for actually 40 renders for 20 buildings in the downtown core. And it was recommended that the committee entertain a pre-approval. So there's a recommended motion here that the CIP committee pre-approves all CIP applications under Program 1 for properties which participated in the downtown revitalization render project funded through the RED grant to a maximum of blank percentage. That this pre-approval only be applicable where the CIP application demonstrates that the proposal is fully consistent with the render and includes all aspects recommended for facade throughout the downtown revitalization render project, and that applications eligible under this pre-approval shall meet all requirements of section 8.3 of the community improvement plan and shall provide a minimum of 3 quotations as supporting documentation.
Okay, Julia, I'm going to ask you first about, I'm sure that Becky has briefed you on the RED program and what your feeling is on moving ahead, because it's an economic development program. The businesses have all been spoken to. The consultant has come up with a plan. Some of them look great. Some of them look okay. This never went to council for council's blessing. So we're kind of up in the air here. They haven't given us our blessing, given us our blessing to go forward, and they haven't said we shouldn't go forward. So we're kind of up in the air at the moment. So what's your feeling on the project and also the report that was provided and the drawings that were provided?
So I've seen the drawings and I've seen the finished project. I have not seen the report itself. I feel it's a tool to help businesses understand what their buildings could look like. And I think it's an important tool for CIP, and not only for committee members, but also for business owners or property owners who are looking to do improvements, facade improvements. I don't necessarily think it needs to be approved by council. In terms of a pre-approval, I think everyone needs to be vetted individually. And it needs to go through the process. So if they come and they say, we want to do everything that's outlined in the renderings, we can say, great, that your application is pretty simple. We know what it's going to look like. We have already identified that this is something we're looking for or fits the design guidelines. And I think it would just expedite an application process. But in terms of pre-approval, what does pre-approval mean? That just means that we like it and they're going to get a better chance of getting funding. But depending on how we look at changing the process of CIP, it might be irrelevant at that time. So I'm not necessarily in support of pre-approval for anything. I think everyone needs to submit an application and it needs to be reviewed individually based on what that application is asking for.
Chris?
How are these 20 buildings selected? Are they based on heritage? Are they based on aesthetics that they need a facelift? Or how did we decide this? I wasn't even aware that there was 20 selected. Who selected them and where from?
Mary, any idea on that? Or
I can answer that a little bit because I wasn't necessarily involved in picking it, but I did give suggestions. So essentially it had nothing to do with heritage. It was more about walking down the downtown and looking at the buildings that most needed the facelift. So, and then there was consideration for the commercial units and who was in it and how much money they were willing to put in to do the facelift. So that's why there's different levels where some are just calling for a coat of paint, where others are calling for a complete gut job.
Chris, I think you're the only one here who hasn't actually seen the design work that was done by the consultant.
No.
I'm assuming Julia has now. I'm pretty sure Mary did. Dorothy, with the Heritage Committee, you've seen it already also. I don't know if you'd like to take a look at a copy of that before we kind of move this ahead, and we'll just
Certainly be nice,
to our next meeting and go from there. When I think of the pre-approval, again, like Julia mentioned, it would be on each individual building. We would look at it, and I know the consultant has looked at it from the standpoint of our downtown policy and the revitalization report and so on. So it should all fall into place, but I wouldn't take that for granted. I would want to make sure that our committee looked at it one by one by one and said, yes, this falls within our parameters, we agree with it, and then move it to council for their blessing or not. But maybe what we could do is move this section to the next meeting, Mary, and if we could get a copy, Julia, to Chris Samur of the design and the report, then maybe he can take a look at it. I don't know if Karen has seen it. I know Chris has seen it. So as long as everybody's seen it before our next meeting, I think that's fine.
Whose department does it fall under actually? Economic development or whose?
Economic development.
Yeah, okay.
We applied for the grant in order to do that.
Yeah, and the Economic Development Advisory Committee has not been meeting over the last couple of years, but I am, as the chair, asking for it to be before council changes next November. So,
Okay. Dorothy, you had a question?
If there was pre-approval, what would be the role of this committee?
Well, I think our role would be to examine it, see whether it falls within the parameters, and then recommend a certain funding to go against that project. And then it would still have to be approved by council when the application actually came forward. So we're pre-approving, but there's no application on the table. An application may never come forward. But if one does, this is what we've looked at ahead of time. This is what we've approved for funding. So if we're going to give them $5,000 and they have a $15,000 project, they already know they're going to get $5,000 recommended by us to council for approval. And they can look at their budget and say, yes, I can invest 10,000 of my own money into this, and it's going to make my business look a lot better downtown. It's going to make the downtown look better. And then we send it to council for approval after that.
So we would just be assigning the dollar value then?
Well, we would be examining it to make sure that that we were in agreement with the consultant's perspective of what it should look like and the changes that should take place to the front of the building. Okay, Julia?
And I think we're over analyzing this document and putting too much emphasis on it. Sorry. It's just a design guideline. It's really just a visual representation of what buildings could look like in the downtown. I think it's got blown out of proportion, that this is a document that is going to be guiding all of future design going downtown. It's not. That's what the design guidelines have been put in place for. This is really, the consultant just went to identify buildings to say, these are the buildings that are currently in disrepair or need the best, who are the best candidates to have something done because they haven't been touched in a long time. And this is what it could look like. And these are the levels that could be improved based on the tenant or the property owner's investment. So like Mary said, it could be a coat of paint just to beautify the outside because it's looking dingy, or they could do a full facade improvement if they want to invest that much. Or maybe it's a progressed approach where the first year they're just painting, the second year they're doing signage and awnings, and then the next year maybe they're investing a little bit more into windows and other design elements based on those schematics. But again, they're just renderings, they're just examples. And I think we should be using it as a tool for the CIP rather than making it a formal document that has to be approved and adopted by council. I don't think that's necessary.
What I like about it is it may open people's mind to, wow, the front of my store could look like this. Like,
yes.
It could really spark some thoughts that would really improve the way the front of my store looks, and that would improve the business that I have come into my store. And I think it really has the opportunity to do that. Sometimes people look at the front of their store and they don't see the possibilities of what could be done. This gives them some options and some possibilities to think about and say, wow, I could do that. And
most people aren't very visual, like you said, right?
Exactly.
They can't imagine it. Chris, you're a developer, you go through, design processes, so you already have an idea of what it's going to look like and you can envision that. But most business owners, they're so busy, they don't know how to maybe envision what something could look like. So you're exactly right, Herb. It's really to help them inspire them and to give them some perspective of what it could look like.
And also it inspires them by saying, we could offer this much money to help you do this. And that's another reason why they might say, yes, I can put in an application. I like the way it looks, and I like the fact that I can get some money from the town to do this and move it forward. Chris?
Unfortunately, the timing couldn't be worse with COVID. Most businesses are just trying to survive, never mind trying to invest on the facade and everything else, unfortunately. But we do have to look forward. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I don't see that as just being like right now. I see it, next year or the year after, they still have those drawings. They still have the possibility of investing some of their own money and getting some money from the town and hopefully inspiring them to move it forward.
I'm interested to see what the drawings look like or what's been proposed. That would really probably help me visualize it. So,
Okay. So if we could get some of that to Chris and also maybe to Karen. Has Janet seen it?
Yep.
Janet
It's
has?
actually Janet's recommendation.
Yes, okay, that's right. Okay, but she's seen the drawings and what goes in there.
That's right. I believe it was attached to a previous CIP agenda as a correspondence item, but it wasn't really up for discussion, so I'll recirculate.
Okay, so maybe we could get a copy to Chris and to Karen so that for the next meeting, everyone has seen it and what we're talking about, okay? Okay, let's just put those three on the shelf for now. Okay. Okay, evaluation scores. Mary?
Sure. So I guess this recommended motion is just more of a promise to endeavor to do this as a committee. So one thing that we're recognizing that's happening is that applications that are evaluated and do not receive that minimum 50% sufficient scoring threshold are still being entertained by the committee for funding. So the recommended motion is that the CIP committee honor the minimum 50% score threshold identified in the evaluation matrix for program 1 applications.
Okay, this kind of goes hand in hand with us doing the evaluation on
as a
the
group,
yeah, beforehand. I agree with the motion, but if we were doing it in person, then it might come out differently.
I really like doing it as a group. It was so much easier. We could say, yes, we like that. No, we don't. And we, rather than individually, it's again, goes to an individual preference where as the group could say, yeah, we agree 3 out of 5 or whatever. I really like that system that we had. COVID wrecked everything.
It did. While we're still on the internet and not past COVID, we really need to move this one forward because I find we're giving it a low score, yet we're bringing it back to the table for further discussion. And I'm not sure we need to do that. That's just complicating our lives. If everyone fills out the app or the survey and we get those scores in and it comes out low, then we just move on. It's done. It's a done deal. Now they can change their application and bring it back to us, but we really should follow our own policies and our own guidelines to vet those applications. Any other discussion on this one?
I feel like a school teacher. I love Mary. I think she does a wonderful job, but I'm grading her book report is all I'm doing. I'm not actually, we're not discussing it. If I could evaluate it, if we could put in an evaluation after we're done a discussion on it, it'd be so much better that you could actually you could form an opinion one way or the other. Basically, I'm grading Mary's book report and it's just not, it's not the way as good as it used to be. Let's just, as thorough as it used to be, I guess.
Yeah.
And you do a great job, Mary. Don't get me wrong.
Thank you.
Mary, we can, well, if we decide we're not going to even look at it after, then it won't make any difference, but we can modify the scores after a discussion in Zoom, right?
You can, and to be fair, the committee can revert back to doing the evaluations during the meeting. So when this was brought, this was a discussion between Becky, Irv, and myself, kind of trying to strategize the politics of our committee meetings on live streaming. Let's just call it that. So this was just us trying to strategize. If what we have found at this point is that it is not working, then it is not working. And we can try to do more of that impromptu scoring that we were doing when we were doing in-person meetings until we do finally have the opportunity to resume in person.
Okay, just to remember that one reason we went this way to do the evaluation ahead of time is because it takes up a lot of time at our meeting to do that evaluation if we do it on screen. So we're trying to cut some corners to save some time to do it before the meeting, then get it on the table for discussion. Here's what the score was. Do we need to modify any of this? Then we do the modification and then we set our final score after that. So it's not like we don't have a chance to discuss it and make some changes. We do, but at least we've got a ballpark to shoot at ahead of time to keep the process rolling and to keep the meeting rolling. But again, this one, if we put this one forward, all right, maybe we can put a different one forward. Dorothy, sorry.
I would be more comfortable doing the evaluation after we've discussed it in the manner that Chris suggests. Because I think that we run the risk of ruling something out that we should be looking at. And I personally, I sometimes think, well, I don't know. I can't tell from the application whether they're going to use high quality building materials. How do I know that? You know, I have no expertise in that area. And I think it would be much easier for me personally to evaluate if we had talked about it first.
Okay, Chris, would you like to put a motion forward to that respect?
Sorry, what was the motion you want me to put forward, Irv?
So that we're going to do a discussion on each of the applications before we do an evaluation. Then we do an evaluation after the discussion in conference.
Agreed. I would like to pass that motion that Irv just said, Mary, please. Or not pass it, I'd like to first it, I guess, is our.
Okay, can I have a seconder on that, Dorothy?
Mhm.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, it's going to take a little bit longer, but I think it's the right way to go.
What is our total budget, Mary? Like 75,000 a year? I can't remember now, or is it only 40?
So they were giving us $50,000 a year for the first 5 years because that was
Okay.
stipulated in the CIP. This year, we only got $30,000, but we had carryover from last year. So we had 45,000 and some change. So right now we're down to 40, soon to be 15.
So once we get some good, we used to do field trips to the actual locations as a group and say before COVID hit, and we were able to actually have a very good discussion even at the site to say, yes, this makes sense, or maybe yes, how about this instead or something, you know, it just made more sense for sure. So it was nice to meet in person for sure.
It was. When we talked about the subcommittee and the subcommittee meeting with the applicant on site, I know Chris McGuire would rather see that the whole committee had an opportunity to meet with the applicant on site. And I think we used to do that. So maybe we need to go back to that. And whoever can make the meeting, it can be set up between Mary and Julia. And whoever can make the meeting, then we just have a meeting on site with the applicant. Chris?
I'd love to have Mary and Julie vet it long before we get there, though. If it's not something that we even should entertain or waste our time on, I would love that vetted out before we get there.
Okay. So
If it's just putting perfume on a peg, then I'm not really, I want something that's, you know, that is tangible, I guess.
okay. So we'll move in that direction. Okay, and that kind of, the evaluation score, that kind of negates that motion because we're going to do the discussion first in council or in committee before we move forward. Okay, conditions of approval, Mary.
Sure. So I'm not sure if this negates the previous, because I guess you'll have an opportunity to discuss. But anyways, again, just a little bit of a promise from the committee that the CIP committee endeavor to exercise the ability to recommend conditional approval more commonly.
Okay, so I think what that means, that's regarding money, am I correct?
So it's not so much the money. I believe what it's referring to is that for small little aspects on an application, sometimes what's happening is that the application is returned to the applicant for clarity instead of just making it a condition of the approval. So that's
So-
just to state that we'll try to do that more often.
Okay, so in the motion, if we're going to approve $5,000 for something and we want to ensure that they're going to have gooseneck lighting, then we just put that as a condition of approval rather than sending it back, getting the application changed, sending it back to us for discussion later and trying to streamline that process. Can we agree with that? Okay, all in agreement? Okay, good. We'll move that one forward. Orientation training, Mary.
Sorry, I'm not as fast as typing as you are talking.
Sorry.
It's all right. So orientation training, so just a little bit of context on this. We are noticing that sometimes we lose pieces of policy that we need to be reminded of sometimes. So we do that orientation at the beginning of the term, but sometimes we just lose those pieces of policy over time. So it says that the CIP committee undergo an orientation / reorientation session in blank of each year during their term.
Yeah, I think that would be excellent for all of us, just to get a re-perspective of the policies that we're working under, maybe at the beginning of the year once, to just set us going forward. So we have a full understanding of the policies. We can ask questions and get answers on things that we might not understand or that we'd like to see modified or whatever, and kind of move that forward. Can we agree on once a year training for all of us? Okay,
Can we make it in Mexico or somewhere? Just a question.
as long as you're paying for the trip.
Oh, we got 45,000, we're good.
Okay, so we'd probably do it on a Zoom call anyways, as it's part of our regular meetings. Okay, all in favor? Yes, okay, thank you. We'll approve that one. Mary, I think that's it.
That is it. Do you
Okay,
want me to move on to the next? Well, do you want to move on to the next item?
yes, so that would be CIP Monitoring Subcommittee.
You want me to speak to that real quick? So I gave a little bit of an overview of it earlier. So essentially, we are down a member on our CIP committee, subcommittee. This monitoring committee has essentially been helping me collect the baseline data that was not collected at the beginning of the CIP when the CIP was launched. And they've been helping me kind of, because I've obviously been with the town for 2 years, and that's 4 years shorter than the CIP's been in effect. So they've been helping me kind of evaluate and find that context that I need for the report. So right now that committee consists of Irv and Councillor McGuire. Becky also sat on that committee, so we're down a representative. I'm just bringing this back because I had assumed that the committee would like to appoint a third member to this committee before we start reviewing the report.
Outside of reviewing the report, is there anything else for the subcommittee to do, Mary?
At this point, giving me so basically at this point, I've drafted a report that's inclusive of the initial discussions that I've had with the CIP committee. Like I said, they're helping me get that context that I didn't have prior to my employment. So a lot of what's in there right now is just the subcommittee's perspective. But
So maybe-
no, you're right. There's no other mandate other than reviewing of this report. And as per your suggestion during those committee meetings, it will be brought forward to the committee at a later date as well.
Okay, so maybe we don't need a subcommittee. Maybe we just need to wait for your final, not final, but your final draft, I guess, before it gets to us, and then send it out to the whole committee here for review and then comments at one of our committee meetings. Chris?
I think I saw Julia put up her hand to volunteer, I thought, so.
If you need me, I will definitely step in now that I've taken over for Becky, so.
For what it's worth, Carl has already requested that Julia have eyes on it for the rest of you. So she will be involved no matter what.
Okay, so maybe we don't need a subcommittee at this point. If we need one at a later date, we can put one together. But let's, if Julia's going to review it first, fine, and then it should come out to all of us equally, and then we'll review it at a meeting as a group.
Wonderful.
Okay, Correspondence items, none. Roundtable. Chris, I'll start with you.
Oh, I'll have to think about that for a second, Irv. You caught me off guard. Come back to me in a minute, sure. Let me
Okay,
think.
Dorothy, anything to add today? No? Julia, anything to add today? No?
I
Uh,
think I've talked enough today.
Okay. Mary?
Yes, so Chris had mentioned before we went live, there is that survey regarding resuming in-person meetings that the clerk has asked me to circulate it. So just a reminder, the committee to fill that out before the end of the weekend because survey results will be pulled on Monday.
Okay, perfect. Chris?
Oh, I'm good now, Irv. I don't think I have anything to say. For a change, yes, thanks.
Okay. All right. Again, I'll echo Mary's comment about filling that out. It's very important. If we want to go back to in-person meetings, we need to tell council that that's what we need to do. Julia, I'd like to welcome you again to our committee. This has actually been quite a quiet meeting today. I don't know if that's representative of who's here today or what, but yes, it was a good day today. So thanks for joining us. I appreciate your comments and your experience.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And our next meeting is Wednesday. No, next meeting is not Wednesday, August the 8th.
Oh,
So
it's September the 8th.
is it September the 8th or?
September the 8th.
Okay, so our
I
next
changed the
meeting
day and
is
not the month.
Wednesday, September the 8th at 4 o'clock. Hopefully in person, not on this channel. Okay. We actually had a short meeting, a little working group meeting in person there a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it worked much, much better. So that we'll see if we can move in that direction. Okay, can I get a motion for adjournment from someone? Dorothy, seconded by Chris. Okay, we're set to go. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good week.